At this time, I would like to ask for a roll call. Ms. Robinson?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
I can hear Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. This is roll call. Mayor Bennett. Vice Mayor Parton.
Here.
Councilor Randolph.
Here.
Councilor Holloway.
Here.
Councilor Gore.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Pelham. Councilor Pelham. I'll go back and call once again Mayor Bennett. Vice Mayor Parton, there are 5 present. You have a quorum.
The mayor's muted. I don't know if she knows that.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I just can't hear on my speaker.
I can hear you, Mayor Bennett.
We can hear you, Mayor Bennett.
Okay, Mayor Bennett, so your name was called with the roll call. Are you still muted?
Here. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Thank you. 6 are present. There's a quorum.
I'm having trouble with my speaker, so I'm just going to ask for Vice Mayor Parton, can you take over the meeting until I get IT down here to fix my speaker?
Sure. All right. I wanted to welcome everyone this evening for our regular city council meeting. It's 6:33. We're going to go into our work session. Do I have a motion to approve the work session agenda?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? I'm on my cell phone, so are there any hands that are currently raised?
No, sir.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vice Mayor, can you please identify who was the movant on that motion?
I believe it was Councilor Denton, and then it was myself as a second.
Yes, sir. This is the motion to approve the work session agenda. Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Councilor Pelham, Mayor Bennett, Mayor Bennett, Councilor Randolph,
Yes.
Councilor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Councilor Gore.
Yes.
Mr. Vice Mayor, you have 5 voting yes, 1 absent, and 1 no answer.
All right, thank you, Ms. Robinson. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Badiata to do the Stormwater Management Program work session.
Well, good evening, Council. I guess someone else will be controlling the presentation slides.
Share her screen. Share her screen, please. Share. You have some.
Where's my?
We're getting the technical difficulties worked out so we can share the screen.
You share? Okay, thank you. How you sharing your screen? Where's your mouse for this? Right here. Okay, share this screen. I don't know when. Which screen is it sharing? We can hear y'all. Okay, now share. New share. It was set up. I didn't even miss it.
All right, here we go. All right, Mr. Badiata.
Okay. Well, thank you. On behalf of the Stormwater Program, appreciate the opportunity to give you an overview of where we are. For those of you who saw my presentation to council about 2 years ago, some of this will be a repeat, but I do think it's important that everybody is working from the same understanding of the current program. So go ahead to the next slide. Start with the program overview, then we'll get into TMDL, total maximum daily load status, and then we'll talk about the citywide infrastructure plan. Next. So 2015, council voted to adopt a stable revenue source for the program. And there were 2 general mandates: to protect the general health, safety, and welfare of residents, and to meet the requirements of what is a heavily regulated permit program called the MS4 permit program. It's also maybe important to note that this is right on the heels of an EPA administrative order for compliance. And so the city had to lick its collective wounds and repair some of the program elements. And I think that might have been the genesis of adopting a stormwater fee. Next slide. So very quickly, the goals of the permit program is to maintain and operate a municipal separate storm sewer system. And basically that includes all the drainage infrastructure in the city. And the reason the city of Hopewell is one of these permit holders is based on a population threshold. So Colonial Heights and Petersburg and Henrico, Chesterfield, they're all MS4 communities. An example of a county that is not an MS4 would be Prince George. Now, even though they may own some storm sewer systems in the county, they don't have the population. So the 6 minimum control measures very quickly, and I think, let me just stop for a second and say, I think the presentation materials included notes, and I was told that some of you may be able to see those on the handouts and some of you may not, but I'm basically following those notes. So if you don't have them, I can get those to you tomorrow, and it'll save you from having to write a lot of things down. So the 6 minimum control measures: public education, public participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, erosion and sediment control for land disturbing activities, post-construction stormwater management, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal operations. And the special conditions is the city's obligation towards compliance with total maximum daily loads. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. The city is a Virginia Stormwater Management Program and also an erosion and sediment control program. So we have to implement those programs in accordance with state law. And then finally, to provide regular maintenance of the city drainage system. So those are 3 very disparate obligations that we have, and yet they all tie back together to the stormwater and safe conveyance and protecting the city. So this slide, just to give you the perspective that when the city adopted this program, they looked at 5 different levels of funding. And in descending order, you can see a level of service 5 down to level of service 1. And the predicted revenue is based on the impervious cover in the city. And level of service 1, which is bracketed by the red box, shows that there was an anticipated revenue of approximately $1 million. And we had 3 staff. And column 5 is the technical support, basically consultants. Column 6 would be the implementing, documenting, and reporting on the 6 minimum control measures, reviewing stormwater plans, reviewing erosion control plans, issuing permits, and it includes staff salary. Now, these numbers may not make sense when you look at 10 employees in level of service 5 and only 3 in level of service 1, but the permit compliance is still at $385,000. So these were just numbers that were put together to try and figure out how to staff the program. One thing that I like to draw your attention to would be column 9, where we have $0 in equipment. We have $0 in MS4 projects, which is basically drainage and drainage system maintenance and repair. So this is a very bare bones level of funding. Next slide. And this is where we are today. So we started in FY15 with a $1 million seed money from water renewal. And then fiscal year 16 was not a complete year of revenue. And then moving forward, you can see that we average in the mid $800,000, and that includes both residential and industrial. The percentages that you see in each of the columns represents the non-payment, and that's just a comparison of what's billed versus what's collected. So in FY20, we were only 3.8% below the billed amount, which is pretty good. The industrial collections are in blue, and you can see those numbers drop slightly from FY16 to FY20. And that's because the industries can take advantage of a credit program if they are an industrial permitted facility. It's a very generous credit program. And that's partly because we do not manage the runoff coming from most of the industrial facilities. They manage their own runoff. However, all of the truck traffic and other vehicle traffic that comes in and out of the city certainly has an impact on our drainage system. You can see the wood chips and other debris in the gutter pans on a regular basis. Another piece of information would be that we're estimating that this year, fiscal year 21, the residential revenue is running about 10% below the billed amount. And that's likely due to the pandemic and other factors. Next slide. So here, the actual revenue is shown. That was taken straight from the slide, the previous slide. The 3 office staff is consistent with where we were predicted to be. We have added 2 maintenance crew members. Again, that's a bare minimum for operational effectiveness, but we've been making it work, and I'll show you some of the product of that. The technical support, which is column 3 on the previous slide, is now the billing service contract. So that $100,000 goes to a different purpose. Column 4 is the MS4 permit compliance. And you can see in FY15 and 16, we began to draw that down to where we now no longer pay any consulting fees for maintaining our permit. That's what our 3 in-house office staff do on a daily basis. The MS4 projects, that's the work that we have to contract out because it's either too big of a job for our in-house crew of 2 in terms of manpower or in terms of equipment. So there's an asterisk at the bottom because you can see that for this fiscal year, we're projecting $415,000 in MS4 projects. And the reason we're able to do that after averaging $100,000 in previous years is that we received some grant money that allowed us to free up some of our program budget in order to address some significant drainage infrastructure problems. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. TMDL projects in fiscal year 16, $334,000, and in fiscal year 17, $2.76 million was dedicated to the Riverside Park stream restoration. And we had quite a bit of grant money for that project. In fiscal year 19 and 20, you can see that those dollars are zeroed out because we were fortunate enough to receive more grant money that allowed us to continue 3 projects, actually 4 projects at no cost to the city. And we'll talk about them in a little bit. The $1.04 million in FY21 is completely grant funded. The equipment, column 7, we at this point in fiscal year 21 have been able to live off of our equipment as it's being maintained and was purchased in prior years. So we don't anticipate having to spend more. And then for MS4 maintenance, as you can see, we added the crew in FY18, and moving down to FY21, we're projected to have completed almost $380,000 in maintenance work. And that's a quantitative assessment based on the work completed and using contractor rates to determine the value of that work. So the crew is becoming more efficient, and with the right equipment, they're able to get a lot more work done. So we're very happy with that performance. Next slide. Okay, a snapshot of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. Riverside Park gave us a tremendous boost in our compliance goal at a cost of about $3,500 per pound of total phosphorus. That's a very, very cost-effective number. If you were to look at other localities in the coastal plain and Piedmont region of Virginia, I think we would probably be among the lowest, if not the lowest. The Hopewell High School Mathis Park Stream Restoration Project will be starting up in the next few weeks. And that is 100% grant funded. And that brings our cost per pound down to $2,241. And I put that in a red box because that project will allow us to meet 100% of our 2025 required reductions. So all the dollars that otherwise would be programmed to continue to get these reductions will have met by the end of this fiscal year. Now we've got 3 more projects on the list, and you're probably wondering, if we've already met our goal, why do we have these projects still proposed? And that's because we were fortunate enough to get grant money. So it's at no cost to the city. And it actually gives us a credit towards having additional load reductions that we could use to offset other projects in the future. Development, economic development, what have you. So in total, our cost per pound in the bottom there is $1,693 per pound. And I just can't emphasize enough how important that is. If there's a benchmark to measure the success of the program, this would be it. Now, you're probably asking the question, what about all the drainage infrastructure? I mean, if it were me and my yard were flooding, I wouldn't be as impressed by how many milligrams per liter or pounds per year of phosphorus we're keeping out when my basement is full of water or my yard is full of water. Next slide. So we've developed what was coined the Wonder City Waterworks program. The list that you see in the lower right corner is not all inclusive. This is just a snapshot in time, and it reflects what we've come to realize that we have before us. There are dozens of additional projects that are not on this list. Some of these projects have multiple phases. We have not had the opportunity to do any scoping or preliminary assessment yet. So it's very difficult to develop cost estimates when we don't have survey, we don't have utility data. There's an awful lot of work that has to be done before we can begin to really put together detailed cost projections and begin to prioritize these projects. Next slide. So I would like to point out, this is just a close-up of that list, and I want to point out that the 2 projects at the top of the list, 1 and 2, have been on the drawing board for almost 3 years. And so we're finally being able to get to them because we've been able to free up some of the money. And just in the past week, we've had 2 more alley projects that represent some significant drainage problems, property damage to residents. So while we have this list right now, it doesn't take long for there to be several more that will jump the line and potentially move to the top because it represents a safety or property damage issue. Next slide. And I want to show you a couple of examples. Okay, you can go ahead to the next one. And then one more time. To the next slide. So this is a watershed that you may have been familiar with. North 15th and Broadway, the Broadway Baptist Church. Next slide. The photograph is the 24-inch pipe 20 feet underground in the parking lot. And for those of you that saw the sinkhole that opened up this summer, you saw that we had quite a project to try and repair that pipe. Next slide. These 2 pictures are in North 15th Ave and in the Fishtails restaurant. So we know that we have drainage infrastructure problems, and we're really on borrowed time for when we're going to repair these versus waiting for them to collapse like the other pipe did. This is non-reinforced concrete pipe, and we've got some indications that there's quite a bit of that kind of pipe in the city. And because this pipe is close to 20 feet in the ground, it just can't hold up to the loading. Next slide. This is the Heretic Ave outfall pipes, and we have about 120 acres draining through these twin pipes. Next slide. And this represents just one spot within that run of pipes. And the photograph on the upper right, the corrugated metal is completely rusted out. On the left, the top of the pipe is beginning to collapse inward. So there aren't many options to repair. Sometimes you can line the inside of a pipe and solve for a rusting bottom or invert. But if you have the collapse occurring at the top as well, then you don't really have many options other than digging that pipe up and replacing it. And I mention that because when this program was developed, infrastructure repairs of this type were not anywhere on the radar for what the program budget could handle. Next slide. Next slide. This is the Cattail Creek watershed. And we just zoomed in. We have the 3 dots are culverts that need to be replaced. We have Moultrie Avenue. So I'm now looking at the list at the bottom, A through F. We have an engineering project out of the city engineer's office doing drainage improvements. That project will actually help our culvert replacements, which are the red dots. We also have drainage problems at Wagner, Grant, Lee, Jackson. You can go down the list if you're familiar with that part of the city. And so one large project in that sub-watershed actually will have a ripple effect and will help us implement some of these other projects. But then over to the right I've identified DuPont Elementary School because we have a drainage system that snakes down through that watershed that has significant capacity problems. We have several properties that experience flooding on a regular basis. And in order to solve the problem, we'll have to do some involved hydrologic and hydraulic analyses to identify what the problems are and how to repair them. We're not just going to go in and replace thousands of feet of pipe. We believe the pipe is in good shape. It's just not big enough. Next slide. And when we talk about pipes being big enough, this is one of those culverts that is between Moultrie and Wagner on Joseph Hooker. And these twin pipes are not in very good shape, but we're looking at what is a little bit less than a 1-year frequency storm. And a 1-year frequency storm means that there's 100% chance that we're going to get that much rain over the course of a day every year, at least once. A 10-year storm, which is about 3 times as much rain.
No, I got my phone on, so I have my phone on.
The 10-year frequency storm has a 10% chance of occurring.
I can't get any sound on this.
And a 100-year frequency storm has a 1% chance. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. This is that same culvert, and this is a very different storm. And what this represents is a storm that we don't have a design standard for. It wasn't that the total amount of rain was that much. It was that it came down so fast. And so the questions become, what design storm do we design to? We get calls after every major storm where people tell us how it's never flooded like this and there's something wrong and there's something, blocking the culverts, which all may be true. But the bottom line is we've been getting more and more intense rain events. And we have portions in the city that flood badly during these type of events.
Excuse me, Mr. Badiata.
Yes, ma'am.
I needed to ask the mayor. We've got, it's about 7:03 and Mr. Badiata's used half of the time. Are we going to expect the other work session presentations to be done by 7:30?
If they're not completed by 7:30, I'll actually ask the city attorney on that, if she can opine.
I can draw this to a close because the next 2 or 3 slides were really just to identify that we have some very fundamental questions that need to be asked and answered in order to put together a comprehensive plan that will prioritize the types of drainage and flooding challenges that the city is facing. And it's not there's no easy answers. There's no way to, make a snap decision on this type of a thing. But I think it'll be something that the council needs to consider and begin to work through a process of developing some protocols for the program. Thank you. I believe the next slide was just asking if there were any questions.
So I don't see any hands.
Mayor Bennett, I'd like to just make a couple, just quick comments.
Okay.
Mr. Badiat, I just want to thank you so much for this very good, in-depth presentation. Identifying some of the biggest and most chronic problems that we have in terms of drainage issues in the city. And you can see, anybody can see that this isn't just a ward-specific issue, but it really is a citywide issue that, like you said, needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And I know that your team has been doing an excellent job. All we got to do is go back exactly to that one slide that you showed, which we, once these couple projects are over and done with, we will have met and exceeded our TMDL standards, and we can really be able to focus on a lot of these chronic drainage issues, from undersized piping to piping that's just collapsed to neighborhoods that don't even have a drainage system in and of itself. So if it's okay, and with the consensus of city council, is everybody okay with allowing the stormwater engineer and the city engineer to continue to develop this comprehensive list of drainage issues across the city, and to work towards a strategy towards resolving them over the next 5 to 10 years, and also to research possible funding sources, so that way we can get this issue resolved quicker rather than later.
Madam Mayor. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Mayor Bennett?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes. I'm having a bit of trouble hearing. What were you saying?
You talking about this Council Pelham? You talking about me or Mr. Barton?
Vice Mayor Parton, did you suggest something?
Yes, so if it's okay with city council, would it be all right in order to allow Mr. Badiata and Mr. Butler to work together towards continuing to develop and refine this comprehensive list of drainage issues across the city, and to start working on a strategy between the two in order to resolve these issues within the next 5 to 10 years, and to start looking towards different ways at which we can be able to afford fixing these issues, and to look at all different approaches towards that.
And Councilor Pelham, what was your statement?
Yes, ma'am. I also want to say that I think I've been waiting for this for 10 years regarding the comprehensive approach for all the flooding. That was probably asked 10 to 14 years ago. So I'm very elated and happy that there is at least a plan that's requested to make it a more comprehensive approach to the entire city. However, I don't see Arlington a road on there, and once there was a pipe that kept a couple of neighbors' yards flooded as well, and it was on there longer than 3 years. So I would like to know what happened to that project. Not tonight, but I can talk to you tomorrow, Mr. City Manager, about it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have hand raised as well.
Me too.
Okay. Councilor Bohr, and then Councilor Randolph. And if I'm not calling your name in the appropriate order, I apologize. I'm on my phone and I'm also looking at the screen.
No worries. I'm gonna lower my head before I forget. Yes, I definitely support this effort. As Councilor Pelham stated, this has been a request for multiple years of some members of council. Last year, I had on the agenda specifically specifically asked for a list of projects and how much they were to develop a financial plan. So I'm happy that now we have the support to be able to move forward with that. I definitely think that's something that people should see in regards to where their money is going, what projects are in queue, and how much these things cost in order to have repairs. But then also to understand what the needs of the department are in regards to how to address flooding. There was a storm that we had really bad recently. I just asked people to forward me pictures and video because I know this is the issue. And Mr. Badiata has done a great job. He's well known in his field. The other thing I would say, this is also timely in regards to looking at water as a whole. The state has, advancing legislation that talks about water as a public right. And so in addition to that, I'm on the LGAC board for the state, just the gubernatorial appointment. I will definitely be reaching out to Mr. Badiata in regards to helping to share options for the state to consider in regards to adding more money to localities. LGAC got an increased amount of money for stormwater in our last state budget, but that was reduced due to COVID. But this year, our governor is chairing the executive council for Chesapeake Bay. We have our meeting in March where we'll be picking our new leadership for the organization. And so it's Virginia's turn for that. So we'll be primed to really have a voice in regards to addressing the Chesapeake Bay in our multi-state and district agreement. So I look forward to that conversation and for everything you've done for us.
Thank you for that, Councilor Gore. Councilor Randolph?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think all of us have been looking for this to happen for a couple of years and been worried about flooding throughout the cities. So I think all on council have been doing this. Mr. City Manager, do the engineer and Mr. Badiata report to you?
Yes, ma'am. Ultimately to me. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with that said, we have to also ask the city manager and not just Mr. Badiata and the city engineer, but to ask the city manager from his staff to have permission to, go through this, that we want them to do this, but, their resources and their time and what they're working on also depends on how they're scheduled and everything. And anybody that's going to work on anything with Mr. Badiata should go through the city manager. I too think that we need to have some kind of a plan. I thank you, Vice Mayor Parton, for having Mr. Badiata come and give this. And I think that, we've got to look at priorities. There are, in every single ward, there have been issues with drainage, not just in yards, but up to car doors and seeping into cars. I have a street that gets so flooded constantly because of whatever issue that they have with drainage. And I don't know that that's been determined, but whether it's piping missing, deteriorated, or just not enough large piping to take the runoff away, that I think all of us can relate to that, and the citizens that call us when this happens. And so it's a priority for all of us. We have to figure out where the money's going to come from, as Vice Mayor Parton said. And Mr. City Manager, I hope you would encourage your staff throughout all of the departments to always be looking for grant opportunities and way to fund it, especially since we cannot and have not finished the CAFRAs and don't know where we're at. So thank you very much.
I see no other hands raised. Mr. Badiata, thank you for your presentation this evening.
You're
and
welcome.
At this time, thank you. At this time, we'd like to move to this work session number 2.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor. My name is Tavia Griffin, and I'm here to present work sessions 2 and 3. The first is for a conditional use permit for 2408 Lynchburg Street. The applicants are on the line tonight. They are Christine Browning and Edward Howell. They are requesting a conditional use permit to be able to have a 6-foot fence in their front side yard. I do have pictures of that in your packet. And also you should see the screen. Hopefully you can see my screen as I'm sharing the PowerPoint presentation. This property is located in Ward 5. It's approximately 10,400 square feet. It is on the corner of Hill Avenue and Lynchburg Street. They are requesting the fence over the 4 feet requirement to deter pedestrians from walking through their yard from the railroad tracks. You get a lot of pedestrians walking through their yard. As you can see, the railroad tracks are at the rear of their property. And also they have a lot of debris and litter that is thrown in their yard from the pedestrians and also from those who are riding in vehicles coming through this area. The property is zone R2, and again, the fence would be 6 feet, and the fence actually has already been put up. It is the fence that you see in the larger picture on the right-hand side beside the shed. It's just in that area, but it is above the allowable 4 feet. The Planning Commission at their meeting recommended approval of the conditional use permit. This was done on January 7th, and the application met the approval criteria for conditional use permits in accordance to Article 21, Section D. The chairman of the Planning Commission, Mr. Elidi, is on the line tonight. He's able to answer any questions you have. And again, Ms. Browning and Mr. Howell are also on the line and are able to answer any questions. We are requesting that this will go to public hearing. And that is all to this presentation. If you have any questions, again, I'm happy to answer them.
I do not see any hands at this time. So there are no questions. Councilor Jensen, do you have a question? Your hand is raised.
Oh, sorry, that was from the other one. That I don't have any for this one.
Okay.
Let's see if I can take it down.
I'd like to thank Mr. and Miss Browning for being here this evening. And you're able to leave if you would like. Thank you.
The next work session is for the Spotlight program. This is just to give you an update. And due to time, because of time constraints, I won't go through all of the slides. I will just concentrate on the Spotlight houses that we want to present tonight. As you know, we have a scoring criteria, and that scoring criteria is based on public safety, the structural integrity of the structure, fire hazard, the context, the attractive nuisance, and the general appearance. We don't bring any of the structures to City Council if it does not score over a 50. And we do have the building official, Mr. Robert Todd Hawks, on the line tonight. He's able to answer any questions you have. I do want to thank Mr. Hawks and his team of inspectors. They do an awesome job. And I just present the information, but they do all of the hard work in the field gathering this information for you. So thank you to Mr. Hawks for everything that he does. 57 properties thus far have been identified as blighted since 2017. 20 blighted buildings have been rehabbed as a result of being placed on the Spotlight list. 26 properties were demolished and 2 properties were demolished due to imminent danger. Imminent danger is in the state code, and it allows the building official, if there is imminent danger for structure, he has the authority through the state code to require it to be demolished fairly quickly. 2 properties are currently in the process of being rehabbed. 1 property is boarded. There's 1 property that has actually a resident. This was the first time that we had to have Spotlight for a home that has a resident living there. And we were working with social services to coordinate services for this particular person. And tonight, we are asking that you consider either the demolition, acquisition, or rehabilitation of these properties. We are recommending demolition of all the properties. And then there is one property of the 57 that we are currently still processing and have our inspectors scoring. The first property in question is 2100 West City Point Road. This is in Ward 1. It's an accessory structure. It scored a 50. This property has been on the spot blight list since 2018. And these are pictures of the structure here. The next structure is 1300 Wall Avenue. It's located in Ward 6. It's a single-family detached dwelling and had a score of 53. This has been on the spot blight list since 2020. This did suffer a fire probably like 2 years ago, and no work has been done on this house since then, and we're recommending demolition. The next structure is 905 Arlington Road. This is in Ward 6. It's a single-family detached dwelling. This has been on the spot blight list since 2018. We've had numerous conversations and meetings with the property owners. No work has been done at this point, and it scored a 54. And you see the. And the last house is 420 South 18th Avenue. It's located in Ward 3. It's a single-family detached home. This has been on the spotlight list since 2020, and it scored a 51. I will stop here just for the sake of time and ask if you have any questions. I will say that we like to have a work session prior to moving forward with the public hearing. So thank you for agreeing to have this work session. Our next step would be a public hearing. At that public hearing, we would hear comments from citizens, and also at some point, we're asking the city council to make a decision regarding either demolition, acquisition, or rehabilitation. And this does conclude this particular presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Griffin, and also Mr. Hawks. I do see a few hands raised. First, Councilor Randolph, and then Mr. Altman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to know, I've been a proponent of the the house in Ward 1 to be torn down for a while. So thank you, Mr. Hawks and Ms. Griffin, for bringing this as one of the ones that needs to come down. I'm not familiar with the others, but after the public hearing, if there is no issue during the public hearing, how soon would you all come back to us, or do you need to come back to us to tell us when they're going to be demolished?
Mr. Hawks, did you want to answer that question?
Far as the public hearing is concerned, if we can get a determination that night, we will put them on our agenda, and as long as funding is available, we will work hard to get these taken down.
Okay, if we only and you all, they're in the order that they would come down based, or would you take them by score basis? If we don't have enough to take all 4 of them down, you just take the highest score for one first, or how do you determine?
That would be the best way to do it, but it also depends on funding and what it would cost to tear them down. So if we don't have the money to allot for a larger home, we may have to jump down the list in order to get something down.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hawks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Altman? What did you?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor. I was just going to ask Ms. Griffin to provide the address of the one house that's pending the inspector review, which would come back when we had the public hearing on all of them, just so council would know, since it wasn't, the address wasn't included in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. I see no other hands. Thank you, Director Griffin and Mr. Hawks, for your time and presentation.
Madam Mayor,
oh,
I have a question.
Yes, excuse me. My apologies. Ms. Councilor Holloway.
Okay. I will direct my question to to Ms. Griffin in reference to the house on Delaware Avenue. I note that you stated that working with social service with that situation. What exactly is social service and Karen are doing?
Social services is trying to relocate the resident of that particular structure.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Altman, you asked me a question. I wanted to answer that. So 2406 Waverly Street is the address, and we would not be bringing that back before council. That just got on the spotlight list. So we are in the process of mailing out letters to the property owner so that we would do that on the next cycle and not on this cycle.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Mayor Bennett, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you again, Mrs. Griffin and Mr. Hawks, for this good presentation. You mentioned on there the accessory structure to 2100 West City Point Road. What about the actual house itself?
I know the answer to that, but I will allow, I would like Mr. Hawks to answer. He's talked to the people, and I think he would give a more detailed explanation.
Okay.
This home was just recently sold. They had contacted that apartment. We did want to put this on the spotlight list, and they have asked for some time to clean it up. Since then, within the last 2 weeks, they've had two 40-yard containers there that they filled up, and they are working with a structural engineer to look at the home. It may come down the road if they don't think it's feasible money-wise to renovate, but we are in negotiations with them to get this taken care of.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question that I had is probably the one that y'all get tired of me asking about. What about the city-owned house across the street from the cemetery on 21st Avenue?
Is that question for me too?
Yes, you or Ms. Griffin, either one.
I know that I have brought it up. I think that it is a city-owned home, so we have not put it on the list because we have gotten with Public Works and they have boarded it at this time. So the city would have to allocate the money for us to actually take it down. But all the safety concerns that we have been addressed. Brian from over at Public Works has worked with us on securing this home at this point.
Okay. So then, Mr. Altman, I guess my question for you is, how much money has been spent on securing this building, and as opposed to just demolishing it?
I'd have to find that out. I wouldn't imagine it would be too costly to purchase the plywood to board it up, but I can find out what that cost was.
Okay. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
I do know on that home, most of the windows were not broke. The problem was the door going to the basement had been jarred open and people were able to get downstairs. So I know that problem has been rectified.
Okay. I mean, that was, something I brought up, over the summer when I was over there cutting the grass for the city, and you end up seeing, a bunch of, drug paraphernalia and also, clothes from, people that were inhabiting the crawl space and everything. It's just one of those things that I think that, we ought to be tearing down that house. So that way it's not fair to, the homeowner next door that's done a lot of good work to the house. And I think it would really improve our gateway.
Vice Mayor, pardon? This is Griffin. My humble opinion is that if it's city owned, I don't know that it has to be on the spotlight list. It could just be something that council authorizes the city manager to do, from my understanding, and maybe that's, we have to get the opinion of the city attorney, but I don't know that it has to be on the spotlight list in order for it to come down if it's a city-owned property.
Okay, Ms. Robinson, is that true?
The owner of the property, Mr. Vice Mayor, the city can take its own property down.
Okay. I don't know what the mood or the consensus of city council is, but I mean, I would personally think it would be a good idea to include this in with the public hearing to, when we make the decision to tear down the houses, that we include this house in that list.
I'd have to see it scored, but I didn't hear what the attorney said. Can somebody repeat that for me?
She said if it's city owned, so the city can demo its own house.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be on the list. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more comments, questions? Okay, I do not see any hands. And anyone on the phone? So we'll just go ahead and move into our regular meeting. I call this meeting to order. I welcome all our visitors. And at this time, we will have the prayer by Mr. Charles Dane, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, led by Vice Mayor Parton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings you bestow upon this city. We thank you for the employees and workers that worked so hard the last couple of weeks to protect our citizens. Lord, we thank you for the public safety folks. Lord, we thank you for the spread of the vaccine coming more and more to Hopewell, and our residents getting opportunity to get vaccinated over in Petersburg as well. Lord, we ask that you continue to bless this community. We ask you give us strength and wisdom to do what's right here in this lovely little city, the Wonder City, Hopewell, Virginia. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to amend or adopt the regular meeting agenda?
Madam Mayor, I have my hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Gore?
Thank you. I make a motion to adopt an amended agenda. I removed R1 prior to the meeting, but in its place, due to the work session, we can't take action. I would like to add for council to vote on directing city manager to work with stormwater staff and the other directors to create a plan for us to address stormwater projects.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gore, seconded by Vice Mayor Parton. Floor is open for discussion. Councilor Randolph?
If we're going to make a motion to set up a plan, are we going to give a time frame for that to be set up in or to be executed and brought back to council? Or are we just leaving it open-ended?
I was going to make a suggestion, but Parton seconded it, so I was just going to wait for discussion.
Okay.
I was going to recommend that we set a date based off the city manager's advisement so that we can have this information for our budget work sessions. So that way we can include any decisions for maybe appropriating funds to get to a certain dollar amount if we can't fund major projects, but at least have a picture go into this budget cycle as to where we may need to look at. So I would recommend to look at that in April or May, but I will defer to Mr. Altman.
I have a point of information. At this time, Ms. Robinson, we're conducting the regular meeting, and the order of business is to amend or adopt the regular meeting agenda. I see we're amending the agenda to remove R1. Are we adopting another item that's not in the agenda here? I mean, can you give us your opinion?
Yes, ma'am. The motion to adopt an amended agenda, replacing R1 with a motion to direct the city manager to work with the stormwater director and the city engineer to develop a stormwater plan and to return that information in time for the budget work session. So that is greater work.
Very hard to hear you. You keep fading in and out.
Repeat it. The answer to that question is yes.
Yay.
Okay. So the amended agenda would be
yes.
R1, which was the creator workforce, with now a motion to direct the city manager to work with the stormwater director and the city engineer to develop a plan for stormwater and return that information in time for the budget work sessions.
Correct.
And that's appropriate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Gore, you still have your hand up?
Oh, that's it.
Okay. Sorry, is there anyone on the phone that would like to comment at this time?
I would like a
Okay,
point
if
of
not-
information.
Yes, Councilor Randolph. What is your point of information?
I just want to be clear what we're doing because we're going to vote on this motion in a minute. So Councilor Gore said she took off CR1 before the meeting, correct?
R1.
R1.
Okay, so R1, okay. That's why I wanted clarity. Okay, so R1 is off and you're adding this one where?
In its place, so it will be R1.
Okay, isn't R1 is usually what
R1 was removed from the agenda prior to the meeting. All I simply said was to put this item in its place instead.
And my discussion question, Councilor Gore, will you be just giving us a briefing on the R1
Sure.
that you have replaced? Okay.
I do have my hand raised now, I think.
Councilor Denton?
Yes. I guess I'm confused about the, if we move this, make this R1 now having to do with the stormwater, that calls for a vote. That can be an action motion. And we have not, other than the presentation we just received, I have some questions about not having any backup information prior to the meeting, so that we can, if there is a motion, we know what we're talking about. Thank you.
I see no other hands. Roll call, please.
Counselor Denton,
No.
Counselor Pelham, Counselor Pelham, Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, you have 5 voting yes, 1 vote no, 1 no answer. The
Thank you.
motion carries.
Oh,
Madam Mayor,
Counselor Gore, yes.
can you please ask the IT director to contact Counselor Pelham? She's having technical difficulties and just messaged about it.
Okay, I'll definitely do. Thank you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Please let me know if you guys see it. Can you guys see the screen?
yes.
Yes.
Are you looking at the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The motion did pass. So moving on to the consent agenda, is there a motion to amend or adopt the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made by Vice Mayor Parton, seconded by Counselor Denton. Is there any discussion?
On the motion to approve the consent agenda, Counselor Denton,
No, I'll second it.
yes, I understand. I'm taking the roll.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Counselor Pelham, Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Mayor Bennett, you have 6 votes voting yes, 1 no answer.
Thank you. Is my screen still showing?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. We have a public hearing this evening. Mr. Altman?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor, members of council. This evening, we have a public hearing to consider requests submitted by the Hopewell Redevelopment and Housing Authority to rezone some parcels in Highland Park subdivision from R3 to B and B3 to R4 with proffered conditions. As we discussed at previous meetings, HRHA had submitted some proffered conditions and they had amended those conditions. And we had to have another public hearing to consider the amended proffered conditions. And at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Griffin to discuss the rezoning and present a brief overview of the request.
That's been, once again, the council members, hopefully you can see my screen. And it should be showing the city council meeting and the Hopewell Redevelopment and Housing Authority rezoning request. As Mr. Altman said, they are requesting to rezone from R3 to B3 to from R3 and B3 to R4 in the Highland Park subdivision. The proposed parcels to rezone are shown here. This is a review of the building elevation for the 64 units. As you may recall, this property will allow 40 units by right. They are requesting the rezone to increase the density of the parcel to 64 units. This is a rendering of the site design that they have provided for you. Nothing has changed since the last time you viewed this particular site design. What has changed is that HRHA has updated their voluntary proffer conditions. These proffer conditions were advertised in the local newspaper as required by the Code of Virginia. They were advertised 2 weeks in advance, and with the correct timing in between the 2-week notices. I will go through these proffer conditions. We do have Mr. Tavares McCoy on the line, and I believe also Mr. Benham is on the line if you have any questions, but I'll read through these, and then afterwards you can ask them questions if you need clarity. First, we will design and build using the principles. Yes.
Would you just do us an extra favor? As you go through these proffers, would you tell us if any of the proffers are not standard that would come with what the city requires them to do anyway? Do you understand what I'm asking?
So there is a proffer here.
I would read each proffer and then let them know which one.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. We will design and build using the principles of traditional neighborhood design. This includes, but is not limited to, buildings will be built close to the street. There will be sidewalks, walking paths, and or bike paths to connect to future pedestrian scale paths developed by the city. There will be well-designed open space, and parking will be behind or under the building. This is not required for this particular zoning district, nor is it required as part of the site plan review process. This is something additional that HRHA has decided to do.
Great, thank you.
Number 2, the development shall contain no more than 64 units. This is what the zoning ordinance allows, 64. It allows 64 to 68, and I believe they're going to go with 64. Number 3, excuse me. The buildings will be well designed with high quality construction materials. Specifically, the building will have its exterior composed of primarily brick and hardy board material. This is not a requirement in the zoning ordinance. This is a requirement of the financing that they are may receive from VHTA, but this is over and beyond what the zoning ordinance requires. Number 4, the buildings will meet the energy efficiency requirements for Earthcraft certification. Similar, exactly like number 3, this is not required by the zoning ordinance, but it is required as part of the financing that they will be getting if approved by VHDA. So this is over and beyond the zoning ordinance. The plans will be discussed with the police department. Oh, I'm sorry. The plans will be discussed with the police department to include elements of crime prevention through environmental design, also known as SEPTED. This is not required by the zoning ordinance. This is over and beyond what the zoning ordinance requires. We will present conceptual plans and drawings once available for the Planning Commission to review and approve the design of the buildings, the height and number of floors of buildings, the building setbacks, and the overall site layout prior to site plan approval. This is over and beyond what the zoning ordinance requirement is. They do not have to do this per the zoning ordinance. We will work with the city to evaluate and mitigate effects of the development on the city's stormwater system. This is something that will be done as a part of the site plan review process anyway. We will continue redevelopment conversations with City Council to discuss and confirm redevelopment decisions. Of course, this is something that you have talked about in a previous work session with HRHA. It's not a requirement in the zoning ordinance. We will include community space and supportive services for the benefit of residents. This is over and beyond what they are required to do. We will adhere to Virginia stormwater management regulations, Chesapeake Bay preservation area regulations, and erosion and settlement control regulations. This is automatic as submitting a site plan to the city. So this is what they would have to do under any circumstance. We will provide an on-site community center for residents. This is not something that is required as a part of the zoning ordinance, nor required for building a residential apartment complex in the city. This housing will be for replacement of subsidized housing consistent with Comprehensive Plan Housing Chapter 9. We will preserve at least 15% tree canopy, which is greater than the requirement in Hopewell site plan regulations. Article 16, our regulations require 10%. So they are going 5% over for the tree canopy. We will provide adequate lighting on site using energy efficient lighting to meet or exceed Virginia housing lighting requirements. The site plan does require lighting, but it doesn't specify that it has to be energy efficient. And it does not specify that it has to meet or exceed Virginia housing lighting requirements. So this is over and beyond the zoning ordinance. We will prioritize the relocation to consider preferences of elderly or disabled early in the process. This is something I believe that City Council requested of HRHA. Residents of the proposed development will have access to all Envision Center resources, including but not limited to supportive services. This, of course, is over and beyond any process in the city, and this, I believe, is something that was requested at the last meeting. Functioning security cameras will be on site. This is not required as a part of any development in the city, and I believe this is something that was requested by City Council. And that concludes the voluntary profit conditions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and also HRHA staff is also on the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions before we open the public hearing? I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to open the public hearing. Director Griffin, have we received any correspondence in reference to the public hearing this evening?
No, ma'am. The Office of Development has not received any correspondence. We do request correspondence either via letter, email, phone call. There we have a special mailbox for that over the phone, and we have not received any correspondence.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Thank you, Director Griffin. I did see Mr. Tavares McCoy on the line this evening. Mr. McCoy, the public hearing is closed, so if you would like to excuse yourself, you may.
I did have a question, Mayor Bennett. Of course, this was a public hearing. Is there also going to be action on this subject tonight as well?
We do, Mr. McCoy, we do not take action on public hearings. There's a process, so that we will not take action on this tonight. And
Okay,
if I can direct this to Director Griffin, do you know the timeline in which this will come back to council for action?
We did not have a particular date that it would come back to council. It can come back at your next meeting. I don't know of any additional information that needs to be added. I don't know if Mr. McCoy has any additional information. So whenever City Council would like for this to come back, we can put it back on your first March agenda. But I believe the only thing that was outstanding was a public hearing that advertised the profit conditions, and City Council did ask for HRHA to go back and look at the profit conditions and to consider the list that I believe Vice Mayor Parton and some other councilors provided, and that's what they've done. So at this point, I think it's just up to City Council when they would move forward in taking that vote.
Thank you.
And
Mayor.
Yeah.
I
Does
don't,
that-
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if they can, if you all cannot vote tonight. I know on work session items, you don't have a vote, but I do believe tonight that if City Council is ready to vote, they can vote. But I would leave that question again up to the city attorney.
Yeah, we're getting a note from the attorney, and she says, and I thought so too, we could vote tonight if we needed to.
Okay.
And I'd like to make a motion that council consider voting since we've, tonight on this project, since we've had it outstanding for so long, and we've gone through the public hearing and the proffers. And Ms. Griffin clearly gave us what proffers were above and beyond what zoning would require. And so I'd like to make a motion that we take a vote tonight on the approval of the HRHA project and the zoning of the project.
So can you restate your motion? Excuse me. What would your
My
motion be?
rambling motion? I'd like to make a motion that council vote on the zoning for the HRHA project we just had the public hearing for tonight.
I have a point of information, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I'm going to defer to the city attorney if you don't mind, because normally
Yeah.
after hearings, we just have a motion on the floor. I don't think Councilor Randolph would need to have a motion to request to make a motion. So I just want to defer to Ms. Robinson. She should just be able to make the motion like we normally do after public hearings.
Correct. That wasn't real, and you're correct, Councilor Gore. My question was the motion simply to take it to a vote as opposed to vote to approve or vote to turn it down? So one of those would have been preferable, Madam Councilor or Councilor Randolph. But I just wanted to verify, is the motion that you just take a vote?
Well, normally after a public hearing, we will have a motion usually in our agenda. There was no such motion listed or a place for a motion. So I didn't know whether I could go ahead and just propose the full motion or if I had to propose and get council's approval to do a motion to approve. So if I don't need to do an approval motion to make sure everybody's okay with doing it tonight, then I can just make the motion to approve the HRHA zoning on the project for Highland Park R3 to B3 to R4 with proffered conditions. How's that?
That's
That better?
perfect. Thank you.
Second. The motion's been made by Councilor Randolph, seconded by Mayor Bennett. Ms. Robinson, your hand is raised.
That was earlier, ma'am. I just need to lower it.
Okay. Discussion?
Can you repeat the motion again? You guys faded out a little bit on my phone.
The motion is HRHA to approve the HRHA rezoning request, Highland Park R3 and B3 to R4 with proffered conditions.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure what the order of hands are up right now, but I'd like to say something when everybody else finishes.
Okay. Councilor Denton, and then Councilor Gore, and Vice Mayor Parton.
Okay, I just, I guess I wasn't expecting to vote on this tonight since it was a public hearing. So I'm trying to think back at our last meeting, and I don't believe that all of the proffers that we had discussed are listed as presented tonight. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me. Thank you.
Counselor Gore?
Yes. My question that I have is regards to the proffers. They're off the screen now, but it was like second to the last one in regards to communicating with council with the site determination. I just want to get clarity on what that, where are we at? We will continue redevelopment conversations with City Council to discuss and confirm redevelopment decisions. Mr. McCoy, can you elaborate on what that means specifically?
This is a written commitment for HRHA to continue to have these joint sessions with council to discuss future land use and redevelopment decisions. There was a request from council to not basically come in on the back end and be looking at these types of decisions, but to be involved along the way. And so this is our commitment to do that. And I think we have made that concrete with we requested the meeting that is upcoming with council, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. I was reading this as this will be for this, well, number one, that's good. Thank you for acknowledging that and putting that in writing. But I thought the way I read this was that it would be for the development of this particular project, because there was the issue in regards to which site would be selected. And we were told at the time that that conversation is kind of premature, but that we will be included in that when that phase comes. So I don't see anything here in regards to that process. And what I mean by this discussion between Daysville, Thomas Roth, and we were told ultimately that, you know, it's too premature to say which one was going to go first in terms of the order of demolition, relocation. But I don't, if that's how that last bullet point is being interpreted, then I don't see anything that addresses that concern.
No, I'll call your attention to our last joint meeting with the board, with HRHA's board and you all. And I think we did discuss that the decision to move Thomas Roth residents first was based on the overall needs of the redevelopment process for all of those residents.
That may have been mentioned, but ultimately we were told that it was still premature. When Director Benham, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's what I understood him saying, is that it was still premature, that the Housing Authority did not decide on a property that was going to be picked for relocation. So unless I misunderstood or I didn't hear, I mean, I'll defer to staff to see if they heard the same thing, but I didn't get that when we were in that meeting. I thought we were being told that right now it looked like Thomas Roth, but it was too soon to say a hard commitment that it would be that.
Madam Mayor, this is Steve Dunham.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you. So can you clarify if I was incorrect? If I am, forgive me, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. And I didn't see your name there. I'm sorry. I would have asked you the question.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Benham.
Absolutely. I think our leaning is to move Thomas Roth as our priority, although that decision has not been made. But one of the things that we thought we were fairly clear about is that there would be a separation between the request for rezoning and any future redevelopment conversation and priority of redevelopment. And so, although if I had to make the decision tonight, it would be Thomas Roth for a lot of the reasons that have been previously mentioned, but those conversations are continuing. We have a couple of more meetings with our board prior to the meeting with the city on March the 10th. And I'm sure at that March the 10th meeting, this will be one of the areas that we will continue to discuss. But what we want to be clear about is our decision and our request concerning this rezoning is not contingent upon a decision about the redevelopment priorities.
Agreed. Would you interpret the last bullet point? And I think you kind of answers, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. That last bullet point means that we'll have the conversations when that time arises, so we can just be in a loop. So when people ask questions, we can be able to clearly articulate that. Would that be fair to say?
That's fair to say. And I think that'll be part of the March 10th conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Benham. Again, I didn't see you there. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Benham. Thank you, Councilor Gore. I just want to make it clear that the motion on the floor tonight is a rezoning request and not who would be moving or what division would be moving into the apartments. So the HRHA rezoning request, Highland Park R3 and B3 to R4 with proffered conditions tonight is to either approve or not approve the rezoning request. Ms. Robinson, your hand is raised.
Yes, ma'am. Can I confirm who seconded that motion by Councilor Randolph?
I did.
Thank you.
Don't forget Johnny.
Johnny? I mean, Vice Mayor Parton, I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Parton.
That's okay. It's easy to forget me when I'm on the phone. It's all good. Thank you, Mr. Benham and Mr. McCoy for updating your proffers. Still some of the biggest concerns that are outlying, and I understand there's a difference between the actual movement of different residents is separate from the actual zoning request, but unfortunately, I think because of how this issue has been teed up and everything that has been brought forward, I don't think that you actually can legitimately break the two issues apart. And because of that, there's still issues that are outstanding that I do have concerns with about this rezoning. And that's, again, just having that assurance that the Davisville residents, will be the ones to have priority in the movement over the Thomas Roth Court. It's also, to make sure that the individuals that don't get moved have the option to portable housing vouchers, so that way they can increase their housing options. And also, again, you're putting a development into an established neighborhood. So I think that it behooves us to not just say in the proffers that we're going to have lighting, but that we're going to have the bright LED lighting that we're trying to work towards getting the whole city on in order to help improve neighborhoods overall. And then also making sure that we have on-site lighting. And again, I'm a firm believer that if we're going to put a development into an established neighborhood, I think this development should give back to the neighborhood a little bit, and I think it should go to a further extent to pave roads. If development projects in Chesterfield County require those developments to pave roads and make some capital improvements to the neighborhoods or to the area that they're developing, I think that we should be doing the exact same thing. So again, those are just some of the concerns that I still have that are outstanding with these proffers. So that's how I personally feel about those, and hopefully, these proffers will be taken into consideration moving forward.
Madam Mayor.
Councilor,
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say. I just want you to know I'm filing in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you. Thank you. I would just need the motion read again before we vote, if you will.
Okay. Is there anyone else on the line would like to speak or have a comment? Okay.
I would like to make a comment or ask Mr. Benham. Good evening, Mr. Benham, Mr. Boris. This is Councilor Holloway.
Yes,
initially we were speaking in reference to the Davisville client being first removed because of the environment that they were living in. Is there any future consideration for Davisville to come out of that environment or be moving out of that environment?
Councilor Holloway, this is Steve Benham again. Very much so. We intend to very rapidly, once the overall movement began, to seek to prepare a property so that the Davisville community can be relocated. And I think we talked about that at some length at our last work session. We're not forgetting Davisville, not at all. In fact, we think the plan that we have previously discussed with council and will continue to discuss on March the 10th really lays that out in some detail. And hopefully everyone will come away from there with a clear understanding of how we intend to rapidly transition both of these communities, the Thomas Roth and the Davisville communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Holloway. Thank you, Mr. Benham. Councilor Denton, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, one quick question to Mr. Benham. In the site design, do you have a design showing the traffic flow in that neighborhood, since there are some residential homes in there now that possibly over 100 vehicles could be in there? Have you considered the aspect of what that would have on Winston Churchill Drive, going in and out, getting to it, the traffic flow? I just wondered if you had discussed that.
I haven't personally. Tavares may be able to speak to that, and quite frankly, Tavia may be able to speak to that.
Yeah, I was going to defer to Ms. Griffin, because I believe a traffic study is a part of the process of getting site plan design. Oh, I'm sorry, site plan approval in Hopewell.
Good evening, Councilor Denton.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so when the city receives a site plan, we would look at the circulation of the traffic, and the Planning Commission and the Director of Development can require a transportation study to be done for development. So if that's something that we know that City Council desires during the site plan review process, the zoning ordinance does give the authority of the Planning Commission and or the Planning Director to require a traffic study to be done.
Okay, I can just see where we could possibly have some issues there that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Never thought about it, but wouldn't that need to be done, Ms. Griffin, prior to us rezoning it, considering the traffic flow would increase as well? Is that you have a middle school there with 10 months out of the year will be affected by that traffic flow. Increased traffic flow, at least. Can that be done first before we have all the answers before we vote on the change of zoning?
Well, Councilor Pelham, I will answer this way. The comprehensive plan does see the future land use of this property with an increased density. The zoning ordinance would have to follow suit. And as the zoning ordinance is written now, the rezoning does not have to have a traffic study done prior to that. It can be something that the City Council considers. You can consider the impact on the roads. You can consider the impact on the traffic. But does a study have to be done prior to that? The zoning ordinance says no. A study can be required during the time of the site plan.
It doesn't have to be done, but would it be smart to be done because you change it, and if you find out the traffic flow is not meeting with a consistent safety with, especially with the school, then we've done this for naught. It wouldn't make sense to do it. To me, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's something we can do. It sounds like you're saying prior to. So if we could do it, I think we should.
I will defer to the city attorney, but my understanding of the zoning ordinance is it allows you to do that prior to a site plan. It does not give the planning commission or the director of development to require that during a rezoning process.
Right, but why can't your city council can require it though, is what you said, correct?
No, I did not say that.
Yeah. So can city council require that, Madam Attorney?
I think your question as it's presented now is, it brings up the question as to whether or not you can do that in the middle of an application when that particular applicant was not advised in advance of what the requirements would be in order for the approval to be considered and to be voted upon. So if it's council's pleasure to now make this a requirement that is met prior to the time it votes on the rezoning, I think that information has to be noticed properly to the public beforehand. And since in this case it was not, I would just say in this instance, that would not be an impediment for the council moving forward on the motion that's presently before the body.
Thank you.
I have a question, but I see Mr. Altman, you need to speak, and then I see Councilor Gore and Councilor Denton's hand, but are you guys okay with me speaking prior to you?
Yes, you haven't spoke yet.
Okay. Mr. Altman, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to try to address Councilor Pelham's comment. When the traffic analysis that would be required by the director or the planning commission would be done, and hopefully this might make you feel a little bit better. If there are improvements that are required as a result of that analysis, that would impinge upon the site plan being approved. If the traffic analysis comes back and recommends improvements to intersections, to how we interact with Winston Churchill Drive, that would then become part of the site plan approval process. And in order to get the site plan approved, the applicant would have to make those improvements. So while it may be done after the fact, as you're saying, it still would have an effect on whether or not the staff and ultimately the planning commission could approve that site plan based on that impact study.
Yes, namely Highland, Highland?
Highland Avenue.
Yes, it's a very dangerous little street.
And now, as you know, when school is in session and they're dropping off or picking up kids, Highland gets used a lot from parents dropping off kids and making that left-hand turn across traffic.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
It's horrible. Yeah, really.
So when we would do the traffic study, you not only would want to look at rush hours, morning and afternoon, but you would want to look at an extended rush hour that dealt with drop off and pickup traffic with regard to the schools and how that proposed development would impact that also.
Thank you.
And also crosswalks, because you're going to have children that could live here that are going to have to get to school. So there's going to be some things that have to be looked at from not only a vehicular, but potentially pedestrian safety standpoint.
Yes, I'm glad. Yeah, that's consideration for real. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Altman. This question is directed to Ms. Griffin or Mr. Elades. being on the Planning Commission, I'm seeing that it was voted 5-0 for recommendation. And I'm leaning towards there's 40 apartments that can be built by right. And it does not need the approval of City Council. The rezoning will allow the construction of 64 to 68 apartments. So we're going from 40 apartments to 64 to 68, which will increase the livable space. And I think that would be great. However, my question for Mr. Lottie or Ms. Griffin, how did the 5-0 vote, what was considered when you voted to recommend the approval of the request submitted by the Hope Over Development and Housing Authority?
Ms. Griffin, if you want me to answer, basically we considered everything that's been discussed over the last, I don't know, gosh, a year or more with this case. And we felt that it was the right thing to do to get more people in this area and get more people at the time out of Davisville. Now it may be somewhere else, but it's immaterial where they come from for the Planning Commission. We may have opinions as citizens of Hopewell, which I do, but that really didn't play, or we tried not to have that play on our decision. Our decision was to move a certain population out of housing that is either in a bad location or in disarray. The buildings that aren't near the factories but are falling apart and need renovation. These people, if we're going to provide them homes, we need to provide them better homes. That's plain and simple what I remember. And again, it's been quite a long time that we've kind of discussed this back and forth. But in general, we felt that the housing needed to be improved for these citizens, and allowing it to add extra units and change the zoning made sense. Ms. Griffin, if I forgot something, please let them know.
Thank you.
I don't think you forgot anything, Mr. Lottie, based on what the Planning Commission spoke about at their meeting.
Thank you. I just had the question of what was considered, and you answered that. And I'm going to go from there. Next, I have Councilor Gore and then Councilor Denton, did you have your hand up as well?
You did.
I don't think so.
Councilor Gore. Okay, Councilor Gore and then Councilor Randolph.
Okay, so I'm in favor of this evening, and I know it might change some minds as to why, but quite frankly, I've been here from the start of this. I understand why we got to where we are, but I will say that the proffer in terms of constant communication moving forward addresses my biggest concern. Mr. Benham addressing the fact that we're going to have a meeting apparently in March 10th, I think you said, is also good. I will ask, because I wasn't privy to those previous conversations in regards to whatever plan you're going to share with us. I don't know if there would be options in regards to those in Davisville or whatever development is not selected to go first, for people to be able to like get vouchers or something like that in the interim as another option. And I know, clearly right now you might be able to address that. I'm not asking for you to. I would just ask that when we have that discussion, I'm definitely going to ask it so you can have some advance notice. But ultimately, I think Mr. Elides hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, this is about providing housing. And I have my own personal opinions, but it's either or. Both sets of housing need to be replaced. And the longer we delay this process, we just extend people living in subpar conditions, and no disrespect to the housing authority. But ultimately, that's what it boils down to. And I think, especially in light of COVID, we got to see, closer what the real struggles of people are dealing with. And quite frankly, if we can do anything to help people live in better conditions and have a better quality of life, and that's what we need to do. And so, I would say, and this is kind of timely because of the whole water crisis that we had and the conversations that we had with citizens in regards to, questions about American water. This can be an educational tool. We deal with the zoning part, right? That has been iterated by Mr. Benham, iterated by Eliades as well. But if people have concerns about this process, they need to talk to the commissioners that we appoint. They need to be held accountable to those constituents and those citizens who have questions in regards to the decision-making process. What are their plans? And that is who citizens need to go to in addition to their counselors, but that is who's the gatekeeper for this process. And they're not being responsive, that needs to be communicated back because we appoint them to be our eyes and ears. And so that gap needs to be addressed and fixed, and we can have this as an opportunity to address that. And so I definitely support this tonight because at the end of the day, I don't want to stand in the way of anyone getting better housing, whether it be Davisville or Thomas Rolfe. And I definitely would advocate for people to contact their commissioners and hold them accountable. And if they're not being responsive, to let council know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denton.
Yeah, I understand.
Me next.
Do what?
Go ahead. I was supposed to be next, but go ahead.
Oh, I just,
Councillor.
Okay, I understand this probably goes to Mr. Benham or Mr. McCoy. There is, from what I understand, there is additional money coming to Hopewell earmarked to help move the residents over at Davisville to a new location. Does this impact us on this decision tonight?
I'm not aware of any money coming to Hopewell. I'm not aware of any money coming to Hopewell specifically to relocate tenants from Davisville.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure where that came from.
All right, I had been asked that, so thank you.
Councilor Randolph.
First, before I speak on this topic, I need to make the motion to extend the meeting to 9:30.
Second. The motion to extend the meeting till 9:30 has been made by Councilor Randolph, seconded by Mayor Bennett. Roll call, please.
Councillor Denton,
Yes.
Councillor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Councillor Randolph,
Yes.
Councillor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Councillor Gore.
Yes.
Motion
Thank
passes
you.
7-0.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. I saw your message just as I was getting ready to speak, so I thought I'd put that first as we were running out of time. Unfortunately, I was buffering with my phone and I missed a lot of what Councilor Gore said she was in favor of this because of. But bottom line is what I did here is exactly the same reason that I am in favor of this. I cannot stand in the way of people who need better housing. And the whole point of this project is to provide better housing. We have put in place a lot of criteria and issues and thought process than we have for San Francisco Landing. So I would hope that we would hold accountable the same aspects. But to me, bottom line is there's got to be better housing on the way. If they had the authority to build 40, let's just go ahead and let them build the extra 28. We've got some proffers. We may not have exactly what we want, but we will work and hold accountable. HRHA and Mr. Benham hopefully will work with us to provide the best he can for the money that they have and move it forward, because those citizens deserve to live in better than some of the conditions they're living in right now. No offense, Mr. Benham, but that's the truth. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a comment too.
Yes.
Yes. I just I'll be consistent with my no vote because it amazes me that just because something is new doesn't mean it's better. And especially if it's rushed and not considered the overall aspect of people's living and the way they're built. I mean, if you're going to cram more people into one space, why do we always have to do that when it comes to housing, to cram people in and build high and squeeze them in? And I just don't agree with that. It wasn't, the project didn't start off right. It may pass, but it just will not be with my vote because I just look at it as second class when you consider what we're doing, just because the people that live there maybe don't have all the credentials to own a home or whatever. I think we still should give them the benefit of the doubt, not to be packed on top of one another. So I'll stand true to my initial stand of voting no. Let's move on.
Thank you, Councilor Pelham. If there aren't any more comments or questions. Yes.
Can I?
Is somebody speaking?
Mayor?
Yes.
Just, Mr. Bellum said he was not aware. I understand there was an article in tonight's progress index. I don't know if anybody has read that or not. I have not read it, so I do not know, but I understand that's where this came from.
Not speaking to the motion.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, please.
Normally, as various pots of funding are made available, we're notified through official HUD channels. We have not received any notice. Now, normally when we undertake a project, if redevelopment or if relocation is a part of that project, that's funded as a part of the redevelopment. They don't give us money outside of the redevelopment application process. And so that kind of funding would normally come through the various funding sources that we get. So for some arbitrary funding source to be identified to relocate persons from Davisville, this would be the first time I've ever heard of such a thing. Now, there may be funding coming, but it's not designed to relocate persons from Davisville.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benham. There are no other comments or questions. I would like to ask for the roll call, please.
Can we have the motion read out again, please?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in our packet, never mind.
The motion.
I wasn't on the line. Did y'all make any differential from the motion that's in the packet, or is it the same?
No, so
There is
we're
no motion.
making. There isn't there. The motion was made by Councilor Randolph after the public hearing. We're still on the public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
We're discussing that. We're making them, there's a motion on the floor to approve hrha rezoning requests, Highland Park R3 and B3 to R4 with proffered conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
This is Mrs. Griffin. In your packet, there's a staff report, and on page 6 of that staff report, there's a city council draft resolution, which is a motion. It's on page 6, and I have it on the screen.
Okay, there it is.
It very specifically gives you the subparcel numbers associated with the rezoning that I would say needs to be put into the motion, so you know exactly which parcels that you're rezoning. And then you're accepting the voluntary proffer conditions from the letter dated December 14th, 2020. But
I'm amenable to amending my motion to add that.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin.
Counselor Randolph, would you agree to just substitute the resolution and the information contained therein for your motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And who seconded?
The mayor.
I second it. I'm okay with the substitute.
Roll call, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Do you want me to do the roll call?
Yes, please.
Counselor Denton,
No.
Counselor Pelham,
No.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
No.
Vice Mayor Parton,
No.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Mayor Bennett, you have 4 voting no, 3 voting yes. The motion fails.
Thank you, Mr. Benham, Mr. McCoy, for your time. And you can excuse yourself at this time.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Have a great
We're moving
evening.
to regular. Thank you. Moving to regular business. R1, Councilor Gore.
Keep this brief. We just had a work session in regards to stormwater. From my understanding, what was stated earlier, Vice Mayor Parton put this on the agenda. As stated by several members of council, each of us have had a desire to do something regarding stormwater, and some of us have actually taken action by putting stuff on the agenda to try to get a resolution. With that said, listening to what Mr. Badiata shared in regards to there needing to be a serious conversation in regards to what is done about that, I like to just put a motion on the floor for council to direct the city manager to work with the stormwater team and the director of public work and the city engineer to bring back a proposal to council in regards to what will be needed to fund stormwater projects for budget discussion. And I'll refer that date to Mr.
I'll second it.
The motion's been made by Councilor Gore, seconded by Vice Mayor Parton.
And I know Ms. Robinson probably has questions. She has her hands raised.
Yes, I just needed you to repeat your motion, ma'am.
Okay. Request for city council to direct the city manager to work with the stormwater team, director of public works, and city engineer to develop a plan to fund stormwater projects in the city of Hopewell, and to bring that information back to city council during our budget work session. Date to be determined by the city manager.
Direct the
Ms.
city
Robinson.
manager to work with the stormwater team, the director of public works, and the city engineer to develop a stormwater plan, to develop a plan to fund stormwater projects in the city of Hopewell and to bring it back to city council.
During this year's budget work sessions, specific date to be determined by the city manager.
I think I have the substance of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Denton.
Yes.
Councilor Denton, you just had your hand raised. Did you have a comment?
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, something was coming in. Yes, when we say the work session, I know we've got a lot of things right now going on with the city. And I believe I had gotten the impression that we were going to give them 3 to 6 months to do this, to come back to us. I would like to see us, because we've got the budget work going on right now, the departments are doing it. I just would like to see us give the city manager, if he thinks he can do it, that's fine with me. But if he needs more than a month, 6 weeks to 2 months, I can't support this. I'm sorry.
Councilor Denton, Councilor Gore didn't say that it would be a time determined by the city manager.
Okay. Well, could I ask the city manager?
During the budget session.
Point of order, are we? No.
Ms. Denton, I'm comfortable with the motion. We can have a plan together to certainly look at costs, and obviously it'll be broken out over several budget years because we won't be able to do everything in 1 year, but we will definitely be able to have definitive cost on priorities for the upcoming budget year and potentially the following year in that time frame, and then we'll work towards having an overall. I think Mr. Parton talked about in the work session toward working towards, say, a 10-year plan, but absolutely we can have costs back to begin that discussion and that process during the budget. And we'll look at, and as we stated last year during the budget process, and probably the year before that, we were looking at an increase to the stormwater fee to help fund some of this. And last year during COVID, we didn't think it was the appropriate time to do it because we didn't want to increase any additional impact on our residents. So, we will look again at that fee and what that fee would need to look like in order to fund some of those improvements. And as we've said before, staff will continue to explore other options for funding, primarily grants, but we'll be able to bring something back to council during the budget process. Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
Mayor Bennett, when everyone finishes talking, can I ask a couple questions, make a couple comments?
Yes, please do.
Why don't you just put your hand up?
There aren't any hands up.
Yes, there is.
Excuse me.
My hand's up.
Councilor Randolph.
I'm still not comfortable with this motion. I would prefer that we get a little more specific with the motion, and that if Mr. Altman is going to tell us a specific date during this budget session that he's going to bring back what I understand Councilor Gore wanted, which was the costs that we need to vote on for this budget for the following year. And then, as has been established from what Mr. Altman just said to Ms. Denton, a time frame of 6 months or a year or whatever council's pleasure is to develop a 10-year plan. I'd like to have definitive dates for both of those things, because we have a tendency to say we're going to work on something and it never comes to fruition, or it gets put off or whatever. So I, for one, would just like to have more definitive dates in this motion if possible, please.
Madam Chair, can I provide clarification? Because what was shared is actually incorrect about the motion or my intention.
Yes, please.
Okay. So when I asked for the projects to be brought back, Mr. Altman, in his response to Councilor Denton, was accurate. He said that clearly it would need to have appropriation plan over multiple years to be able to fund the projects. When I asked for the agenda to be amended to include this, I actually stated that in my request to add this to the agenda for a vote. So for clarity, I'm asking in this budget cycle to be given a plan, a recommendation in regards to how to address stormwater projects. If their plan includes, which it most likely will, multiple years in terms of allocation, then that should be presented to us. I'm not specifically asking for this current year's amount that they're asking for in the budget, because that will come naturally. What I'm asking for is a overall plan to address stormwater projects as they know it now. So hopefully that provides clarity to the motion that I have on the floor and the intention.
No, I was still looking for a date for Mr. I know you said it's up to Mr. Altman during this budget session, but I would like an actual date that he needs to bring it back to us to. That way it doesn't say, oh, well, he thought it was going to be May and, we thought it was going to be April and,
I'm fine with providing a date, but usually when we do that, it always defers back to saying, let the city manager decide. So I didn't want to try to do that.
No, I understand. I just want him to pick a date, though. So, Mr. Altman, can you give us a specific date that you can have this back, if possible, please?
No, he gotta talk to people.
What?
I don't see how you can give a specific date when he has to coordinate with Mr. B down at wastewater. It's a lot of coordination has to be done. It would be almost impossible to say like on March 31st or whatever.
We're talking May, Brenda, during the budget.
Well, okay, whenever the time is, the city manager said he's comfortable with the motion. If he's comfortable, why are we discussing what his comfortability is? He said he can get it done.
That's what I want to do. I
Well,
want to know.
He doesn't have to specify that much.
Right now, I'm not comfortable with just saying it'll be presented sometime. I would like a more specific date so that everybody knows when that deadline is. Mr. Altman?
Never mind. Ms. Councilor Randolph still has the floor. I'm sorry.
Councilor Randolph, would you like me to ask Mr. Altman?
Well, I've asked
if he
him.
has a date in mind. Mr.
Yes,
Altman, do you have a date in mind, or would you like to come back to council with a date?
I think looking at May, and we typically do our budget work sessions on the Wednesdays of May. I mean, if we could have, and just thinking it will take Mr. Badiata, Butler, and Watson with probably Mr. Dane's involvement into May to have something to recommend. We typically have the discussion of capital after we have the discussion of operating. If we were looking at that last Wednesday in May, the 26th, we should be able to hit that mark, given that our previous budget discussions would be focused on the operating budget prior to discussing capital.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. I do see Councilor Gore. Is there anyone on the phone that hasn't spoken yet? If not, Councilor Gore.
That was left over from before. I haven't changed the motion. So Mr. Altman, do you have a specific date? If that's relevant for all of council, we can do that. If not, then the motion can stand the way it is.
My suggestion is the 26th of May, but if you want to leave the motion, it's your motion. We're going to target the 26th of May regardless to bring it back to council.
Unless there's a consensus of council to give a specific date, I'll just adjust the motion to say budget work sessions in May. That should be a happy compromise, that it has to be in May. I don't know who seconded that. If you're fine with that, can you please agree or disagree?
Vice Mayor Parton, you did have a comment.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Did you have any other comments? Are you okay with the motion?
Yeah, it was pretty much, I think it was addressed between what Mr. Altman, Ms. Randolph, and Ms. Gore, just commented on, making sure that we're not just looking at this year, but we're looking at, 5 and 10 years down the road, because there are a lot of major issues. And unfortunately, we just don't have, all the money and the capital resourcing to get it all done in 1 year. The one thing that I'd like to see, if Mayor Gore's willing to do a friendly amendment to it, is to also charge those three with continually developing that list of ever-growing drainage issue projects. So that way it kind of reinforces the need for those three to be meeting more frequently to address these issues.
I guess with your amendment, Vice Mayor Parton, it's a little broad and it's not directed. Like, of course they're going to meet, but how often do you want them to meet?
Well, that's their discretion. I mean, I don't need to get into the business of telling them how to do it, but just to reemphasize the importance of those three meeting, and it's not just a one meeting once a year and that's it. I mean, this is something that continually needs to be done.
Do you have evidence of these three employees not meeting?
I'd be willing to venture that I don't think that those three particular meet quite often. But I mean, I'm not going to get into that issue here publicly. I mean, we can discuss that offline.
Jeez.
Well, I have to ask the city attorney point of information.
Before you do that, I'm just going to say that I would ask Vice Mayor Parton to just possibly save that for the work session. And we can, have a deeper conversation then, but not to belabor this motion since we have 40 minutes left, and maybe go down a rabbit hole with this, to just leave the motion as is with the compromise, and then maybe at that work session come back with a detailed proposal in terms of regulation that we can address this. If you're fine.
That's fine. I mean, if there's too much confusion with this, people just got to make questions. I'll take when we can get, and let's move forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Altman?
I was just going to say that, we will, once this plan is developed, like any plan, it's a living document. So we will have to review and add projects as issues arrive. So it's not that the plan will become static. So I would anticipate that as we go through the budget process every year, we will have, just like any capital program, there'll be new projects that come online. There'll be new stormwater projects that will have to be looked at and look towards funding. So we're going to have to, on an annual basis, update that plan as part of our capital project process. So it's not that they're not going to meet. I mean, they're going to have to, and we have to remember that we take care of some stormwater projects through other avenues than the stormwater fund that Mr. Bottiotta talked about this evening. We took care of the Poplar Maple Street drainage project that we just did. That was done. Those drainage improvements were accomplished through a road improvement project, as will Moultrie that was discussed this evening. So it isn't just that we're addressing one particular item in a drainage, a stormwater plan or stormwater funding. We do it in multiple ways. So we will be addressing that plan on an annual basis to make sure that it is projects that are completed or taken off, and projects that come about are put on. And so I don't think it's going to be not that the individuals are talking or that we won't, it'll become static. We will have to continue to work that plan as we do any capital projects lists moving forward.
Mr. Altman, and Madam Mayor, may I add to that also, please?
Yeah.
We met just today, the team that you're talking about, and we were talking about the project list that was presented tonight, and as Mr. Parton said, all the other projects that we have on a log. The plan as it's created is going to be not as detailed as you would probably like, because some of these projects are going to require dollars allocated to them to design before we can even know how much they cost. Because some of them are, we don't know what's in the ground, or don't know the detail, don't know what size we need to go to until hydraulic studies are done and so forth. So the plan may not be as detailed initially, but it'll get more detailed each year as you move through the process. So I just want everybody aware that it's not like we know exactly how much each of these projects cost, and we can lay it out and give you exact dollars. We know that an increase in dollars will help us attack more of these issues, and we can prioritize where the problems are. But I just want you to understand, a lot of these projects have not been designed yet, so we don't know the exact cost on them.
Thank you, Mr. Dane. Are there any comments from those that are dialed in?
No, not for me.
Okay,
No.
thank you. Ms. Robinson, will you restate the motion?
The motion is to direct the city manager to work with the stormwater team, including the director of public works and the city engineer, to develop a plan to fund stormwater projects, the city of Hopewell, and bring back this information during this year's budget work session. It initially was to be determined by the city manager, but I believe based on some modification, it's by no later than May.
Correct.
The motion was made by Councilor Gore, seconded by Vice Mayor Parton. Roll call, please.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Councilor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Councilor Randolph,
No.
Councilor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Councilor Gore.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor Bennett, you have 6 votes yes, 1 vote no.
Motion carries. R2, I will direct that to Mr. Altman.
Madam Mayor, members of council, R2 this evening is a request pursuant to State Code Section 44-14621A, requiring City Council confirmation of the declaration of local emergency at its next meeting or at a special meeting within 45 days of the declaration. We declared a local emergency on February 13th in advance of the first ice storm, after the governor had declared a state of emergency on February 11th. This is your next regular meeting as per the state code, and we're requesting that council's approval of the resolution included in the packet authorizing the city manager to declare the local emergency. I would just like to say that we are working on our after action, which will have our timeline of events regarding really the whole process, the first ice storm, the water outage, and then leading into the second ice storm. We'll have all that hopefully to council tomorrow afternoon. We're working with the representatives of the Virginia American Water Company to schedule a meeting for next week with council, so questions can be asked of council, by council of the representatives, and they can discuss the issues that occurred on site and what plans are in place to address those issues moving forward in the future. I would encourage all members of council, if you've gotten or solicit input from your constituents, to have questions available for them that evening, similar to what occurred in 18, and then again in, I think, late 19 or 20. We seem to do one of these events a year, it feels like, with an outage, but we're working on our timeline for that for council. And again, I will have that out to y'all by tomorrow afternoon. And then any questions that you have that you would like answered in advance or for the water company to be prepared for, certainly send them to me and I'll be happy to pass them along. But we are looking to make that announcement of the meeting for next week. And with that, happy to answer any questions. Certainly would appreciate council's support on the authorization of the local emergency.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yes. A quick question is that when the you mentioned the water company, when they do come back to us, can they give us an update on the upgrade that they're working on and when that is anticipated on being completed? And with that renovation, would it preclude us not having another outage that we've had in the last 3 times in probably 3 years, like you said, Mr. March?
Yes, ma'am. Councilor Pelham, that's an excellent question. Yes, they will be prepared. And we actually asked that question of them when we met. And as members of council may remember, there was a discussion of a large upgrade that was going to occur. They made that presentation to council. From what we understand, that upgrade will be online in May. And I will let them answer if it will address the concerns that have occurred recently. But we've also discussed with them that once that upgrade is completed, that to schedule a special meeting of council to conduct a tour of the facility so you can look at the new upgrades that in that project that has been completed, probably in the June timeframe.
Okay, thank you. And also, I think it would be important that I don't know if it's you or Miss Robertson will let us know what the franchise indicates that they're what they're obligated to do for the city without for just not just giving water, but for the inconvenience of so many things. Do they pay for the overtime? Do they pay for whatever? I mean, is that a cost that the city has to go up? Those type of questions they should be prepared to answer as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And to address that kind of briefly, we did have conversations about costs, particularly surrounding that water tanker for fire suppression. And if we would have had to go out and procure that outside of our standard mutual aid agreement, that they were willing to cover that cost. But fortunately, the storm, water was restored sooner, and the ice storm didn't last as long and create another problem. So we didn't have to go outside of our mutual aid agreement. So there was no cost that would have been borne by the city that would have had to been but they were willing to do that. But we'll make sure that they have that they understand that and are ready to answer that question when they come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Randolph and Councilor Gore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Altman, could we also get a write-up of events from Dominion since they had a power outage, and also a transformer that blew that created the part of the first issue, and also from the water company, a step-by-step write-up of what they saw as their. So in other words, the staff gives us what you all went through and experienced. Dominion tells us what they went through and experienced, and the water company gives us that all before we meet next week, so that council can read over all of that and have the verbiage and the information from all 3 of the sources before we go into that meeting to understand everybody's viewpoint and what happened. Is that going to be possible?
I have made the request.
Yes, sir.
I can't make a guarantee that I'll have it, but I've made the requests, and I can guarantee that we'll have ours, but I've made the request. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's all I need you to do. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Counselor Gore.
Thank you. I already asked them questions in the email, so I'm not going to belabor that point. Counselor Randolph and Counselor Palm asked some of the questions I was going to relay. But in terms of this legal review that we're expecting in regards to our oversight over American Water, it seems like we don't have any. Whatever that determination is, I strongly advocate that we communicate that to the public in some way, shape, or fashion. Especially since there is a misunderstanding in regards to this being a municipal water system, and the citizens having a clear understanding about what our authority is and oversight as it pertains to American Water. That really needs to be cleared up. Additionally, I want to just state for the public record, I am asking for you to request American Water to have a public conversation as a company with their clients, which is our constituents. This has impacted their lives, which we all know. Some are asking questions about their water bills, credits, reimbursements, charges, and that is something that they need to have a conversation with the public and address them directly. I have a concern that, yes, they're coming to us as they should because it's impacted the city as a whole. But ultimately, I really don't want this to be a shield for them to not be able to address the public directly because that is their customers. This is a private business. And so I'm definitely going to be strongly advocating for them to have a public conversation. And lastly, I just want to follow up on regards to that whole issue that caused a lot of stir in regards to the story that was circulated, saying that a part was going to be needed and then the water was going to be on until Friday. Yes, that was addressed that night. However, I still have concerns in regards to how that was communicated to the public, that it was not accurately reported according to American Water. And then also how they're addressing some of the constituents on their public's pages. And I know we can't regulate that, but in looking at the comments, it is concerning that some of the stuff they responded to, they didn't really clearly articulate the city's involvement in the problem. And then also when they addressed the media story about the part, they didn't do a statement. They put it in a thread on a Facebook post. I think that's something that we need to address. So to recap, I'm asking them for a public meeting of their own with the public in regards to them as clients and customers, communication from the city in regards to that legal review as our authority over American Water, if we have none or if we do, and then also to address their social media. Thank you.
Are there, Vice Mayor Parton, were you going to say something? I heard you. Is there anyone on the?
I was just gonna make a motion to go ahead and approve the resolution. I mean, if everybody was finished asking their questions.
Is anyone on the line?
Second.
Have a question? Okay. The motion's been made by Vice Mayor Parton and seconded by Councilor Pelham to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to declare a local emergency. Madam City Attorney, you call the roll, please.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
7 votes voting yes.
Council.
Motion carries. Moving down to the council request, CR1, creation of a City of Hopewell Skill Bridge Fellowship Program and/or on-the-job training and apprenticeship program to support veteran military spouse transitioning service. Member Workforce Development, Councilor Gore.
Yes, I'm just putting this on the agenda in regards to an opportunity for us to develop a skill bridge program. The City of Hopewell is a Virginia Values Veterans V3 certified employer under the Commonwealth of Virginia, which means that the city has received training to support veteran workforce development. There is a new partnership with the Navy to have a skill bridge program for all V3 certified employers. Skill bridge programs are under the Department of Defense. They allow transitioning service members to obtain real world experience prior to separation from the military. When this occurs, their salary is paid for by the Department of Defense and no expense for the employer. And I think up to 6 months. So I know there was conversations in the past in regards to Hopewell Water Renewal starting an apprenticeship program. I think that was started, but I think it has ended. I'm not accurate. I'm not sure about that. But anyways, the goal is to see if staff, state manager, and HR would be open to looking at there might be any opportunities for us to develop a skill bridge program. The terms to create it, you work with the Department of Veterans Services staff members. They help you create a curriculum and a program, and then they also approve it, and then they help to recruit veterans to for that opportunity. So I'm mentioning this because we wouldn't come out of pocket with salary. Of course, there'll be operational costs in terms of office supplies or whatever would normally be used, but that will be fleshed out in the communication. I'm not asking for this to be something immediate. I understand we're in a COVID posture, but this is prime time to think about how we can contribute to assisting with workforce development coming out of COVID and aiding our neighbor, Fort Lee. In addition to that, OJT and apprenticeship programs, they're not like a skill bridge program. The employer pays the cost for that for the salary. However, if they're DOD approved, which can go through the Department of Veterans Services, veterans can use their GI Bill benefits to supplement their pay and also housing vouchers. And in comparison of the two, skill bridge is the most preferred, but I wanted to provide two options for HR to consider and the city manager. So this request is the city council is amenable to looking at that with HR to see if any departments might have opportunity to consider. And if so, then bring that back and then obviously have a conversation about how to connect them to move forward. And that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Gore. Did you want to take action on this evening, or you would like to?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'll actually ask Mr. Altman if he thinks that this is something initially as a possibility for some of the departments to consider. If not, then we can stop here. But in regards to, there might be opportunity to create some fellowships like the wastewater renewal. Sheriff's departments have done it. I know that's not under us, but Sheriff Kephart does have the sheriff department certified as well. You can do it with police departments, fire departments, any group. Mr. Altman.
Yes, ma'am. I think in our continued effort to have a good relationship with Fort Lee, I'm certainly willing to look into it and learn more about the program and see if it's something that we can do, because I know that we do have a lot of transitioning servicemen and women in the region, and we continue. I mean, we have a CMC tomorrow, and we always continue to work, and I always like to tell them, you know, we're here to support them, and this will be one of those opportunities that we could probably support those men and women in our service. So yeah, absolutely. If we could have an opportunity to kind of look into it a little bit further and see what the requirements would be, and if we can handle it and if we can do it, then getting some opportunity to have some either whether it be veterans or transitioning veterans and spouses do internship programs, or yeah, and have someone pay for it, that would be we don't mind that at all. So I'm amenable certainly to help Fort Lee and what those men and women do for us. So we can take a look at this and bring back a plan if we think it's feasible to work through with HR to bring back to council. But absolutely important on our behalf. I think we would all agree to support our neighbor in Fort Lee and those men and women on post that are serving us.
I think it would be good if you're open to it, then to have HR look at it and then to come back to council to say if they think it's a good idea before a plan is developed, to see if council still has buy-in support to move forward. I think that will be helpful with maybe questions and stuff, so they're not a full-blown plan developed. And if that's the case, what would be a rough time frame you think that HR would need to just do some preliminary investigation and to bring idea about if it's worth pursuing back to council?
If we could have until the second meeting in March to take a look at it and really have a conversation with our department heads and bring that back, if that would be okay with everyone, I think we can certainly do that.
Okay. So,
Mayor Bennett, I have a question if nobody else has their hands up.
Madam
I guess
Chair.
Councilor Gorsuch had the floor, and and then as soon as she wraps up, you can be next, okay?
Okay.
I will definitely call on you.
Okay, so Madam Chair, to answer your question, I'll just make a motion to direct the city manager to work with the directors to consider if a City of Hopewell SkillBridge Fellowship Program and an on-the-job training and apprenticeship program in partnership with the Virginia Department of Veteran Services is feasible, and to bring back that recommendation at the second meeting in March.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gore, seconded by Vice Mayor Parton. Vice Mayor Parton.
Thank you. And Mayor Gore, this question might be for you, and if you don't know the answer, that's okay. I might just ask Mr. Altman to look into it along with the HR director. But with this program, does it also, I know you're talking about, active duty folks that are, coming out, but does it also take into consideration members of the National Guard as well? Because we have a nice facility, Joint Force Headquarters and the Defense Supply Center up in Richmond that has a lot of technical trades and also really good logisticians and soldiers in the logistics field as just in and of itself that might benefit from a program like this as they're trying to transfer from their military career into a more public sector or private sector job.
Yes, and I do need to clarify, I do work for the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. So the answer to that question is yes, although the MOU that we have is with the Navy for the SkillBridge program is open to all branches of the military. So yes, Coast Guard members will be eligible to participate in that. And I do not know if the City of Hopewell's HR staff has taken USERRA training or certification. If not, they should definitely invest in that because it talks about some of those terms in regards to separation from the military for if they're employed and they have to leave for service, and it really comes into play with the Coast Guard. So to answer your question is yes. And there's also elements that I did not address in my presentation. If council is open to that, we are also promoting women veterans and military spouses in particular, looking at how you can adjust your job posting language, especially for remote positions, to help with employment, because due to families relocating constantly, it is very difficult for military spouses to keep jobs. So I think I gave a little bit more than what you're asking for, but the answer is absolutely yes. And we can recruit across Virginia. So that'll be open to staff and how they work with the Virginia Transition Assistant Team to be able to address that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any more hands. Is anyone on the line that would like to make a comment or ask a question for discussion?
No, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Well, Ms. Robinson, can we have a roll call, please? Excuse me. Can we restate the motion prior to the roll call?
You may, and I will try to do the best I can, and I might have to rely on Councilor Gore. But the initial part of the motion is to direct the city manager to work with city directors to determine if the City of Hopewell Fellowship
program is feasible in the city of Hopewell. That's what I have.
I would just add fellowship program and on-the-job training or apprenticeship program.
Direct the city manager to work with the city directors to determine if the City of Hopewell Skillship Fellowship Program is feasible and or the job training or apprenticeship program.
I will put it in the chat, but that's close. Yes.
Ready for the roll call?
Yes, please.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
7 votes yes, 0 votes no.
Actually, I think it was 1 vote no.
I didn't get a vote. I had yes from everyone. I can go through it again. Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
7 votes yes, 0 votes no.
Awesome. Right. Motion carries. CR2, this would be Counselor Gore.
Thank you. And thank you, Council, for the support in the last item. We talked about in December looking at our online platforms to increase services and opportunities for citizens to engage more with their city government. IT gave us a very brief introduction to what could be done and some preliminary dollars amounts. I think it was like $30,000 from old estimates, and I could be wrong. But when we discussed this at the time, we were debating on whether or not to take action because of the deadline with the COVID money at the time. And so the option was to not engage due to there being concerns that we couldn't enter into contracts without services being done by the 31st. Not to belabor the point, we've already had this conversation. When we got an update in February or January in regards to our COVID funds, I believe there was $80,000 that wasn't previously allocated that was up for grabs, and Congress has extended the deadline for COVID funds. So I wanted to revisit that to see if council will be amenable to supporting that request at this time. And I'll defer to Mr. Altman if that dollar amount has changed for us in terms of consideration.
The dollar amount has come down a little bit to roughly about 40,000 as we've continued to move forward with support of testing within the city. So it has come down since we last discussed after the first of the year, but we do have around $50,000, and we're also looking where we are overall. And as we said before, we know we'll have certainly funds that are in the rent, utility, mortgage arena that may be available depending upon how frequently they're being used. And we also have, so we have some flexibility there. But those dollars have come down as we've continued to support testing activities here in the city as we move forward with, unfortunately, in the COVID world.
Thank you. And quickly, I'll ask the IT director, I'm prepared to make a motion to support this initiative to see what council chooses to do. In terms of the quote or the terminology I should use instead of online services, is there something specific that I should be asking for in terms of the conversation we had in December?
Madam Mayor, members of council, Madam Mayor, may I answer the question?
Yes.
Councilor Gord, the terminology that should be used is digital transformation of online forms and documents.
And that was roughly 30K?
That's an old estimate. I can't give you an accurate estimate today, but the old estimate was 38.
38. Okay. So I'd like to make a motion for the city manager to work with the IT director to obtain a new quote to move forward with digital transformation to bring back to city council for possible support using the remaining COVID funds.
Second.
Ms. Robinson, your hand's raised.
Yes, ma'am. I got the motion up to the word quote. So direct the city manager to work with the IT director to obtain a new quote.
For the digital transformation and to bring that back to council in March for possible support using remaining COVID-19 funds.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
Councilor Gore, is this a fixed quote? Do you know if this is a fixed quote or is this something that we have to spend annually? Is it a one-time?
Some of the costs are going to be annual in terms of applications, but I would defer to the IT director, and we also have 4 minutes left in this meeting.
Okay.
But when she brings back the quote, that should be discussed so everyone has the clearer picture. The motion is just to get support for her to bring back that information, if that helps.
Okay. Councilor Randolph?
I also have a question. So digital transformation is limiting us to taking hard copy forms and transferring them over to digital so that we can interface with customers, correct? Is that all we're going to look at?
That's one element, but I think there was other features that we discussed, and we have 3 minutes. So if I can make a motion to extend to finish this item or the rest of the agenda. How many more items?
Second.
To finish this.
Second for what?
I make a motion to finish this item.
She hadn't even made the motion yet.
Oh.
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
What is the motion?
To finish this item.
Yes.
Was there a second to that?
Yes, it was seconded by Councilor Pelham. Or was it, who was it? That was me. Councilor Pelham.
Motion is to finish this item, which is CR2, I believe that is.
The item is to, I mean, the motion is to extend the meeting.
It was to
finish the item.
Finish this item, which is CR2. Is that correct, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. Only.
Councilor Denton,
Yes.
Councilor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Councilor Randolph,
Yeah.
Councilor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Councilor Gore.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, this goes back to you in regards to your question. I defer to IT.
What question was that?
Oh, was it you? I'm sorry, it was Council.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that it was clear, Councilor Gore. What you stated was for the city manager, and the IT director to request an updated quote for digital transformation, and
Yes.
to come back to council with a, so that would, the quote would probably have to be with that initial price and then the annual.
Yes, and I apologize. I got you mixed up with Councilor Randolph. She had a question after that in regards to being just online forms. And I said there was other elements, but I would defer to IT. So you're correct. I apologize. It was about her question.
Okay, so I'm trying to clarify, because as I understand what Dr. Manker said, it was digital transformation, which does not include some things that are being that I think was mentioned. And Dr. Manker, could you elaborate? Does digital transformation just speak to hard copy forms being digitized for us to send out electronically?
To answer your question, Councilor Randolph, the short answer is yes, but it also includes integrating payments as well into those forms. So whenever a payment is made with that form, that is also generated through the workflow in our Munis environment that allow the customer to pay through through our website and drop it into a treasurer account. So that entire transformation is not just taking the documents and making it digital, but it's also to integrate other aspects into that form.
Payment option, but it would not include new software.
No.
As you and I've talked about. Okay. That's what my concern was. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, there's other elements that I think that if council is willing to look at, one example would be boards and commissions. I've been trying for 2 years to try to get that information live on the website for people to see vacancies in real time. That's an automated process that would take software to be able to do, or either maybe a widget or a plugin or something to help with that. I mean, there's some other things that we can point to improve citizens' engagement online. I would hope that we can look at that as well, or if there's any other suggestions that people have to improve our online presence. I would say to add that to the list and reach out to the IT director and the city manager for them to bring all of that information back. So when I think of digital divide, I mean anything that we can think of to improve our online presence and engagement and interactivity.
Councilor Randolph, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Yes, I did. And that's why I asked the question, Councilor Gore, because I've already reached out and gotten a quote and was going to mention to council the quote that I got today on boards and commissions, because I talked, the mayor had asked about how we were going to get this straight, and I indicated that I would work on that, and I'm going to put it on the next agenda as to how much it would be. But I would prefer that, for clarity purposes, that we look at all things, not just, and that we all understand what we're looking at. So that's why I was asking for clarity for the money, all potentials of what we could spend this money on.
Yeah.
Because the boards and commissions, and I'll just go ahead and say it now, the quote for software to do that, which would be citizen facing as well through our website and interactive for the citizens, is $2,000, but it's per year. It's not a one-time fee. We have to buy a module from Munis, or have the module brought in, and then they will set it up, as I understand. But it is just like we pay for Munis every year, we would have to pay this additional amount. So I was going to send that out to everybody about what I was putting on the agenda for the next meeting. But since this came up tonight, that's why I was trying to clarify. Because I'd like to look at not just, payments and how we can do those documents, but also do other things if possible. And if not, then look at how we can do them outside of COVID money. So that was my only point for clarity to understand what you were asking for us to vote on.
Yep. I think it's a comprehensive list of items to improve our modernization in terms of our use of technology. And so I would say give that, if you already worked with IT director on it, great, put it on the list for her to report out on. If anyone else has any suggestions outside of what we both discussed, then put it on there. It's fine. I just think that whatever we can come to an agreement with is just a benefit to everyone in the city. So yeah.
And Councilor Gore, I think you and I talked about this before. You and I were put on the technologies committee. Mm-hmm. And I'm more than willing to work with whatever list and prioritize it with you and bring it back to council for them to vote on, so that we can be very specific on what priorities, we need to use it on. I don't know whether the rest of council would feel that way for this committee to work on it, but I'm just suggesting that could work.
I think that would be a great idea.
As long as we can meet in March to not prolong this from being on the March agenda, because we also voted in January, I think it was, for the board. I requested for us to look at engaging citizens to be on boards and commissions, and that was supposed to be a work session in March. So this is all still timely. So if we can meet in March for this to be on the March agenda, then I'm fine with that, as long as we don't miss that deadline.
Are there any comments or questions from those that are on the phone dialed in?
I do not have any, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Robinson, can you restate the motion, and we are ready for the roll call?
The motion is to direct the city manager to work with the IT director to obtain a new quote for a digital transformation and to bring back to council in March to possibly use remaining COVID funds. Councilor Denton?
Yes.
Councilor Pelham?
Yes.
Mayor Bennett?
Yes.
Councilor Randolph?
Yes.
Councilor Holloway?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Parton? Vice Mayor Parton?
His phone was dying, so it may have died.
Councilor Gore?
Yes, thank you.
You have 6 votes voting yes, 1 no answer.
Motion carries. That is the end of our meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.